It's the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. Thanks for joining us. And before we go any further, thank you so much for the positive response you gave us to the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast last week. It is much appreciated. If you'd like to get involved, send your messages to james@cricketbadger.com. Follow us on Twitter @cricket_badger. And if you'd like to advertise on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast, please get in touch. Get your business in front of the world of cricket.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. In fact, the name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
It's that badger style.
And we're going to have a look this week at the Ashes. We're going to preview the biggest series in international Test cricket. England embark down under the captaincy of Joe Root. And I'm joined by Ali Martin from The Guardian to basically select the first England 11 for that first Test at the Gabba. We're going to have a look at Australia and England's chances down under. And that's going to be interspersed by firing the Cricket Badger quick questions at former Yorkshire and England batsman and current assistant coach at Champion County Essex, Anthony McGrath.
It's that badger style.
Ali, thank you for joining me on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. Obviously, writing for The Guardian, going out to Australia very, very soon, isn't it, to start your coverage of the Ashes? You excited about that?
Yeah, can't wait. It's going to be a cracking tour. I think we've got two sort of gloriously imperfect teams, really. They've got sort of sprinklings of stardust and sort of world-class players within there, but also sort of some cracks and fissures already in terms of both lineups. So it's going to make for a fascinating contest, I reckon.
That's one thing that I think is quite refreshing to hear you say that, because I've heard a lot of people saying Australia 5-0, England are rubbish, all the rest of it. But I don't think you can describe this England team as rubbish, regardless of whether Stokes is in it or not. And Australia are far from perfect, are they?
Yeah, there is obviously established class. I guess one thing that works, sort of conditions will get talked about a lot, and I guess that sort of helps the Australian second string a little bit more than it does England's in terms of sort of familiarity. And we've seen people like Usman Khawaja, who's struggled in Asia against spin, but he's quite pretty handy on home track. So it's that supporting cast. I can just see it helping Australia those conditions in that respect. But they're not perfect, and they're pretty collapsible. And actually, I think probably the wicket keeping areas where England really have really do have the upper hand. So that's one area that England should be very confident about, and perhaps that sort of middle order engine room. Although, as you say, it just makes such a difference if Ben Stokes is there or not, and everything's pointing towards not at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to have this chat, isn't it, without mentioning the name Ben Stokes. And to me, you can't take him, can you? I've seen the video. I've obviously kind of read up about all the rest of it. And regardless whether the police prosecute or not, the ECB surely have to make a stand and say, we have standards, and that's below those standards.
Yeah, I've in my sort of reporting of it, I've tried to veer away from personal opinion partly because there's a police investigation still ongoing, and partly because, I think it's as much down to people to sort of view it and make up their own mind. I guess the incident itself is obviously pretty unedifying, and my one concern is that there's probably fault on all sides early on, but there's a point where it could stop and it doesn't, and that's probably where Ben Stokes' participation in the Ashes this winter looks particularly tricky.
We're going to pick our England 11, Ali, and I think we'll go ahead without Stokes. We'll keep...
I think we can safely say he's not going to be there in Brisbane.
Looking down the squad list that England have, to me there are a number of those players who are pretty much nailed on, assuming fitness, pretty much nailed on to walk out onto that pitch in Brisbane. Alistair Cook being one as the opener. But his opening partner, I guess it has to be Stoneman, doesn't it? I mean, you have to start this Test series with Mark Stoneman. He didn't get a big score in the summer, but to me, he's a gritty player, and he's got to have his chance to prove himself.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's got to be Mark Stoneman because he's the only other opener in the squad apart from Cook. So there's no one in reserve there. There's some guys on the Lions tour that's sort of shadowing the Ashes tour, but it's Stoneman is the incumbent. I think there were signs in the summer that you can see what the fuss is about. I quite like the fact that he's quite a mature cricketer. I think if you've scored over 1,000 runs sort of 4 years running or whatever it is that he's done, that he's, he knows his game. He's there's no doubts in his mind about his method. If that method works and can be applied to Test cricket, and all power to him. I mean, I do like his character, and I think we saw a little bit of Headingley as well, that he's got a bit about him as well. But it's still so early in his international career. But we're trying to be positive, we're trying to be upbeat, and I think sort of by hook or by crook, and in a rather roundabout fashion, that they've probably got the best guy for the job in English cricket at the moment. Just if you sort of take out Hasib Hamid, who's obviously had a tricky sort of second season, following on from his international debut last winter. But so if you take him out of it, I think they've got the right man in there. And I think Cook's endorsement is quite interesting. I read an interview with Alistair Cook. He's had a lot of opening partners. It's well documented. I can't remember where we're up to now, even it's sort of 12, 13 since Andrew Strauss.
Yeah, I think we're into double figures now, aren't we?
Yeah, we're definitely into double figures. I know that. And I guess, Cook is always likely in some ways to say that the incumbent at the moment is the best guy for the job. But I can see why Alistair Cook likes him. I think he's he's also left-handed. He's quite a compact player as well. So, that's encouraging. It's encouraging, I think. But there is a slight element of the unknown because he's so fresh and so new to the top level. And there is a big step up from county cricket. I think Division 1 of the county championship is pretty strong these days. But notwithstanding that, there is still a big step up, and we'll see how Stoneman goes.
There is a step up, but you're also massively under the microscope, which you're not on the county circuit, are you?
Well, I think that is the big thing, actually. I think a lot of it is that, and it's coping with that, and that does come back to character, and that's where I think Stoneman, Rocky as he's known, it's a pretty handy name to have if you want to be a solid Stoneman man, but he does seem to have the characteristics to be able to cope with that, I think.
You look at the Australian side of recent years. They've had Hussey, they've had Lehman, who made his debut quite late. They're not a bad blueprint to have. Bringing a player in who's 30 plus, who knows his game. It's not a bad strategy, is it?
No. I think it's I'm all for sort of if you can identify young talent early and get them in, then that's great. But at the same time, you need flexibility in selection, and as you say, Australia have had plenty of examples of players coming in later in their career, and they know what they're about. They know they've been through highs and lows throughout their career, and they can sort of meet each equally, sort of thing. So yes, touch wood, fingers crossed. Is this the one that sticks? I mean, Alistair Cook's been going to this sort of online dating agency for opening partners for a few years now, and finally someone he's got to have a bit of a flutter of the heart somewhere. So hopefully this is the one.
It's been speed dating sometimes rather than online, isn't it? They've been coming through thick and fast. But next on my list of people that are secure, and I think he's about the most secure, is Joe Root. The captain is not going to be dropped for the first Test match, is it? It's
no.
Just, whether for me, he bats at 3 or 4. He obviously likes 4. And that's why he's been at number 4 for the last year or so. But isn't there an argument to say that he could maybe step up 1 and have your best batsman coming in at 3?
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to say he's been doing it all summer anyway, because he has been coming in so early against the new ball. You sort of think, you see him in the nets and you think, well, he might as well be practicing against the new ball first up. But he was starting to waver just towards the end of the summer. I think it was actually after the final Test against West Indies. We were in the post-match press conference and we were talking about it. And Trevor Bayliss, the head coach, has made his opinion very clear. He wants Joe Root at 3, and there was it was let slip that Root had started to entertain the thought again himself. So it'd be interesting to see where they go. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'd like to get him up there early. I guess that we're going to come back to Ben Stokes here, but I guess the one thing is that without Stokes coming in at 6, it's kind of the middle order's a bit weaker, and maybe you want to just spread out your best batsmen a little bit more so that there's no sort of soft underbelly there. But it's this is the problem with this very imperfect England team, sort of world-class batsmen mixing with guys, still trying to sort of forge their careers and identities at that level, is that it's going to be imperfect. I would just have him at 3 myself, but that's a personal opinion. And actually, I do still think that, Joe Root is the guy who knows his game the best. He knows how to get the best out of himself. He's an absolute perfectionist. You only have to see him working in the nets to see how much dedication and time he puts towards his batting, and he's so far so good in terms of being able to switch off from the captaincy and switch on as a batsman. And if he thinks that's his best position still, then I'd back him to do that. But personal preference, just that one place higher.
As you know, I've spent a lot of my recent years watching Yorkshire, and I've seen Rooty at close quarters from being quite a young lad, and he's been somebody who basically, he loves the game. He plays with that cheeky smile because he's absolutely enjoying it all the time, which is really nice to see, I think, of a professional sportsman. But as you say, he works really hard at his game. He loves it. So he basically, I think to him, practice is fun, and that bears fruit, doesn't it? But every time he's stepped up a level, whether it's from Yorkshire to England, from England to being captain, he's taking it on the chin. It's been almost seamless in terms of his rise to international stardom. This is a pressured situation that he won't have experienced before, though, isn't it? Going to Australia as England captain, he is their target.
Yeah, and it's come. I mean, I was in favour last year of Alistair Cook stepping down as captain and Joe Root stepping up to give him a bit of time ahead of the Ashes, and he's had a terrific summer, hasn't he? He's pretty much everything that's come his way he's dealt with very well. There is going to be a departure press conference at Lord's on Friday morning where he will sort of, I guess he'll be addressing the Ben Stokes issue first and foremost, for the first time since it happened. It's a huge test of his captaincy, that, and his leadership and his authority. It's such a blow for him personally. He's very close friend, ally, vice captain, someone he's, risen through the age groups with. For this to have happened and to potentially miss out on an Ashes series is a big loss for Joe, because part of the appointment of Ben Stokes as vice captain was to be his right hand man, his enforcer, his voice in the dressing room, kind of good cop, bad cop kind of thing, if you're going to go down that cliche. And so it's going to be a big test, and Ashes tours, as we know, can be all consuming for England captains, but I would fancy him to be the kind of personality that's, as you say, the cheeky chappy thing is one thing. He's a very serious and dedicated sportsman at the same time. But I think he's been able to find a balance in his sort of 5-year international career so far between the two. And I'd like to think that won't be affected too much, albeit the Ashes is a cauldron like no other, isn't it?
Ali, it's been really easy so far. Cook and Stokes as openers. We've got Root at either 3 or 4. We can basically have him as a floater for now. But there seems to be quite a big gap now. We have a number of batsmen and a number of vacancies, and I'm not quite sure how they're going to go with this one. James Vince is being talked about as a potential number 3, and he's obviously had his chance with England before. Didn't necessarily take it with both hands. Disappeared. Don't think he scored a huge amount of runs for Hampshire this year, so it was a surprise for many people in this squad. You've got Gary Ballance in there, who is very well fancied by Joe Root, a big friend of Root's, who has had his chance at number 3, but I think a lot of people, including myself, think he'd be better off further down the order. David Milan is the Middlesex player, had his chance at number 5. I thought played quite well during the summer for England. Didn't get a big score, but I think he's worthy of his ticket on the plane. How do you see this middle order panning out?
Yeah, I mean, obviously much of it hinges around who goes in at number 3. I suspect, my hunch at the moment, although we're a little bit far away from that first test just yet, we've still got a month to go, 3 warm-up games. But my suspicion is that they're looking at James Vince at number 3. And like you, I mean, I think I'm like many people, actually, like yourself and many people, that this is a very strange selection. It's done on a hunch, isn't it? I mean, if you look at all the batsmen that England have tried over the last couple of years, I think Alex Hales, Tom Wesley, Jennings, Hamid, Duckett, there's been a big churn and turnover of batsmen. And actually, James Vince's record is probably the weakest out of those. He got a full summer in 2016 and didn't manage a half century in 7 tests. Part of me thinks that this is a slight throwback to the 2002-3 Ashes series in terms of England are potentially looking at the batsman most similar to Michael Vaughan. And I know it's something that it's a sort of millstone around his neck, James Vince, for his career pretty much to date, is people have always compared his style with Michael Vaughan. But we did see how, Vaughan adapted in that series, had a monster series, player of the series. England went down 4-1, but he really stood up. And part of me just wonders if there's a sort of hunch, a hope that someone that plays in that way can enjoy the bouncy tracks in Australia and can thrive. But it's a huge ask, and he comes in, not off the back of a sort of dominant county summer. You can say that about Gary Ballance. He's he's been out of the England team and he's scored big runs. James Vince hasn't really done that, so it's a bit of a punt. And he doesn't get into my first team, but I can see England leaning that way. Gary Ballance, on the other hand, I mean, I personally think there's something there with Gary Ballance. I really do. And I mean, we saw in his first sort of stint in international cricket, he raced to 1,000 runs very quickly, got some big scores, got dropped at the start of that Ashes series in 2015. My issue with Gary Ballance, where it's not so much with him, but it's with the selectors, is that when they picked him in 2016, they picked a guy off the back of 100 at Scarborough against Middlesex, if I'm right. Your neck of the woods, so you'll know better than me. But it was an anomaly that century in that it came in a very fallow summer for him, and they picked a guy out of form, and that didn't result in any runs at international level in that second spell that he had. And it just means that the rope, in terms of sort of public opinion on him, the amount of sort of patience that we're prepared to give a player like Gary Ballance is so much shorter now because of the very ill-judged second spell in international cricket. I thought he equipped himself pretty well against South Africa in the early part of this summer. He got in. He didn't go on when he got in, which was a shame. But there's something there for me, and I like the fact that when he does go back to Yorkshire, he scores monster runs, and it just seems like, you know, he knows how to compile scores. Joe Root, you know, knows him so well, so close up, personally endorsed him. He's the captain's pick. I would like to see him get a run, and if Joe Root doesn't want to bat at 3, then and if it was a toss-up between Vince and Ballance, I would go for Ballance personally. I'm with you on Milan. I think there's something there as well. He's the incumbent, and there was some encouraging scores at the back end of the West Indies series. So if I was picking 2 out of the 3, it would be Ballance and Milan.
Would you play Ballance at 3 though? Because one of the things with Gary Ballance that there's a few things with Gary Ballance which I'll stream out as quickly as I can. I think he's quite an insecure player. I think mentally his game is in the head. I've seen him play some absolutely incredible innings for Yorkshire, and yeah, I know it's a step down from international cricket, but he transformed that into international cricket, as you said, for the first year of his England career. I think a lot of it is in the head, and I think a lot of it is people. He knows people are talking about him. He's got a fairly fragile ego to some degree, and I think what the England selectors need to do with Gary Ballance, if they want to have him in the side, and they've obviously picked him in the squad, so that would indicate they do, that they need to basically put their arm around him, tell him, you are the best thing since sliced bread. You're in this team now for the next 12 months. Go out there and show people what you can do. Play like you do for Yorkshire, and go out there and, for want of a better phrase, express yourself. I think far too often with Gary Ballance, after that initial success, he's been on the edge of being dropped all the way through, knowing that everybody in the skybox, the newspapers, are picking holes in his technique. And he's not the sort of person that thrives with that kind of pressure. Yeah, well,
that goes back to what I was saying about that ill-fated second spell that he had in 2016 that saw him get dropped after the Bangladesh series, because I just didn't think he should have been in the team then. It didn't do the player any favours, and now, as you say, patience is slightly short with him. I mean, part of it comes down to the technical side of his game, which some people don't fancy. Now, it has stood up to scrutiny before, and we've seen big runs, but at the same time, some people sort of bemoan a slight lack of flexibility in terms of just adjusting things a little bit. He obviously plays deep in his crease. I mean, in some ways, he doesn't play he plays as deep in his crease as a lot of other players, but he is, he's meeting the ball a lot later. It feels like the left arm quicks in particular. Obviously, Australia got Mitchell Stark, is that people think that there's going to be an issue there, but from the squad we've got in front of us, he'd be in my team, I think.
Is there an argument with Gary Ballance? He's obviously Yorkshire captain now. Is there an argument with Ben Stokes' absence? If you're going to go with Ballance and show confidence in him, say, right, you're vice captain too. Your route is mate. You two go out there and you lead from the front.
Tricky one for me. I think you need the authority of being an established voice in that dressing room, because I think while it's a slightly nominal position, the vice captaincy, I mean, the captain's the main job, of course, but it just feels for me that is a position for an established player. So if I was discussing that in particular, I'd be looking at potentially a Stuart Broad. I mean, if Joe Root, heaven forbid, went down injured on the morning of a test match, it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility that Alistair Cook may even step back up to captain a test match, knowing the ropes as he does and without Stokes there. But that would be a big shout for me on Ballance. I think he's really just got to focus on the one thing he does, and that's scoring runs. And he can do it. He's got it in him. We know he's got it in him. He's just got to rediscover it somehow. Maybe 3's too high. I just think that, if Root is going to be at 4, I'd rather have Ballance at 3 than Vince.
Okay, so we're going to have Ballance at 3. Is there an argument as well, Ali, to say that without Stokes, and obviously without Stokes is a batsman as well as a bowler, and you could actually play all 6 of these guys. You could play Cook, Stoneman, Vince, Root, Ballance, and Milan. Yeah,
you could do. It's funny actually, because I was thinking about this the other day, that the loss of Ben Stokes is probably more acutely felt with the bat, and yet I think when it comes to replacing him, you have to look to the ball, because I think the workloads you'd be asking your bowlers to perform without Stokes in the team as in a four-man attack, as it were, three seamers, one spinner, and especially off spin, which doesn't, off spinners don't go that well in Australia historically, apart from Nathan Lyon, who knows it like the back of his hand, home conditions. But I just fear that the workloads would be too intense on England's seamers, and if they want to get the best out of Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad in particular, you need an extra seam option. So it's more, for me, the balance of the team has to be that Johnny Bairstow and Moeen Ali move up one spot, as does Chris Wokes, and in comes an extra seamer.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm going with this one. So we've got Cook Stoneman, balanced route. We're going to go with David Milan, who I think as well, I mean, just talking about him very quickly, I think he's got a good character to him. He looks like the sort of guy that will puff his chest out. He'll stare back down the track at somebody like Mitchell Starc and not give too many inches. Stoneman, I think, has got that kind of character too. And they're the kind of guys you need in this kind of series, don't you? With it's going to be really intense. You're going to have everything thrown at them. They need to stand tall.
Yeah, I mean, he's a temperament pick in some ways, isn't he, Milan? Because it's his county sort of first class record didn't scream pick me. He has had a good couple of years leading up to his selection, but it wasn't crying out for selection in Test cricket. But as much as that, England saw something in him, something about the way he goes about his business that they think it can thrive at that level. He's a bit of a tinkerer, actually. This is what I found interesting chatting to him during the summer, is that he's a bit of a tinkerer with his technique, and he's always thinking and adapting it. Sometimes I worry that can lead to sort of overthink. You can sort of take the simplicity out of the game and can be quite clouding. But the flip side of it is he's adaptable. And he certainly showed he was adaptable in that West Indies series with a couple of half centuries that sort of went against what we'd expect from him, which is a more sort of fluid attacking left-hander. He actually, dug in and ground out for the team based on the situation. So, yeah, there's something there.
As you say, in the absence of Stokes, I think most people agree that Bairstow, Moeen, Ali and Chris Wokes are your middle order, and that they move up one with Bairstow at 6. He's been England's third best batsman for the last 18 months anyway, hasn't he? So moving him up to 6 isn't really a worry, is it?
No, it's not. And I would like to think that he's definitely got the game for Australian pitchers, and I'd like to think he's got a point to prove after the last Ashes series where he was a little bit thrown in at the deep end, taking over from Matt Pryor with a couple of tests to go, and coming up against a very hostile Australian attack. This time around, I mean, this second spell in international cricket has been sensational, hasn't it? And I love the fact that he loves the gloves. He absolutely, I mean, if you ever mention taking the gloves off him, my God, the look you get from him is an absolute death stare. And I quite like that. I like the fact that he's so desperate to do it.
He hates that question, doesn't he? He hates it. He just wants everybody to actually just assume that the gloves are his. End of story. Yeah.
He should take it as a compliment, I think. I think he should take it as a compliment that people rate his batting so highly that they would potentially like to see him higher up the order. And I know he does it for Yorkshire, and I know he did it for England in India where he moved up to 5 and kept. And physically, I'm sure he's up to the rigours and demands of it. But yeah, I mean, his wicket keeping this year is barely had any mention, which is kind of how a keeper wants it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not so much scrutiny. He's been holding on to everything coming his way, and he's just a very solid member of this team, and I'd be encouraged about how he's going to go in Australia.
With that gloves issue, you've got Folks in the squad as well as the reserve keeper who can carry a bat very, very handily. There is a potential, isn't there, for that gloves issue to come up during this series. If the top order fail, they move Bairstow even further up the order, take the gloves off him and bring Folks in. That could be a potential move for England further down the line.
Yeah, that's why I found it interesting that they've gone for a sort of purer glove man in Ben Stokes, because last winter we saw James Buttler as the backup wicketkeeper and then came into the side as a specialist batsman. You wouldn't do that with Stokes, so if he does come into the team, it will be with the gloves. I fear that if you take the gloves off Johnny, especially mid-series, that it could actually have a negative effect on his batting. A lot of people seem to think it will just, the tap will be turned and the runs will flow even more heavily, but I fear that it will have the opposite effect because of what it means to him.
I agree as well. I mean, there's partly because of his dad. I think he sees himself as following on from that in that respect. But I also think he's the kind of character that he likes to be involved in the game all the way through. And as keeper, you are, aren't you? You're chirping behind the stumps, and you're always part of right in the middle of the action.
Yeah, I mean, he's got an impossible amount of energy, hasn't he? I mean, I look at people like him and I think, blimey, I get out of bed in the morning and just, sort of stumble and shamble along. And I see guys like Johnny Bairstow, and, the energy he brings behind the stumps, the absolute wing heel running between the wickets that he's, when he's out batting as well. So Yeah, I love that side of his game, and I wouldn't want to affect it in any way. I think you don't start sort of messing with your chief assets to make up for deficiencies elsewhere unless, you really have to, and that would, for me, that would probably involve injury ahead of just a lack of runs from the top order.
It's that Badger style.
We take a quick break then from the Ashes chat to be joined by Anthony McGrath, the former Yorkshire and England all-rounder and current assistant coach at Champion County Essex. Been a fantastic summer for Mags, and we fire at him the Cricket Badger quick questions.
If not a cricketer, what would you have done?
That is a tough one. It's not. I think I'd like to do something in sport. I mean, at school, I studied a BTEC leisure and finance, so I always wanted to go something in sport. I'm from a sporty family. I'd probably said down the coaching route if I couldn't play professional. As I say, my oldest brother played rugby and also coaching in rugby, so I would have probably gone down some kind of sporting coaching route.
Biggest influence on your career?
I'd say. Equal parts. One, I'd say Darren Lehman, from a playing point of view. Came over at a time when we had quite a lot of young players and young batters, and he was a real mentor for us all, not just me, but me in particular. I mean, I spent a lot of time with him off the field. His influence for me on the game and batting, and how I thought about batting and cricket in general, was just immense, really. And even when he left, he always kept in touch and was there to chat things through. So I'd say Darren Lehman, and then secondly Kevin Sharp. I think from the moment I met Kevin and we worked together as a coach, I think my batting and definitely the stat side of it completely took off. I think, I really got a connection there. First time I worked with a batting coach so closely. I changed my technique, remodeled my technique, and I think, Kevin had a huge influence on that.
Hero as a child?
From a cricketing point of view, I would probably say Robin Smith. I used to love watching him bat anytime when cricket went on the telly, as much in them days, but anytime I got a chance to see England, or the rare occasion Hampshire were on telly, I just used to love watching Robin Smith play. The way he batted, the way he took on fast bowling, and then I got to meet him and play against him. And sometimes they say, you're disappointed by your heroes, but he wasn't. He was absolutely fantastic. I think someone tipped him off that I was his favourite player, and he took time out and spoke to me, and he was a really good fella, and someone I enjoyed meeting and playing against as well.
What's your best moment in cricket?
It's a close one. Obviously, there's the England debut, etc., and winning the championship with Yorkshire, but I'd probably say the winning the C&G final, Lords for Yorkshire. One, because we'd lost in a final to Gloucester a couple of years earlier, and we were absolutely awful on the day, and it was a bit embarrassing. It was a full house, a stereotypical Lords final, sunny day, and it was a fantastic game as well. And I managed to get some runs in there and I think get a wicket as well. So it was a perfect day really, and to win it going into the last overs, it was just such a special occasion. So I think for that particular moment and that particular day, I think that one stands out.
What's your worst moment in cricket?
Ooh, there's been a few. That is a tough question. Probably say the relegation season with Yorkshire, 2011, I think it was. We were just terrible all the way through. I didn't have a good year. It was a year I had sciatica as well and hardly played. Not just a tough moment, a tough year. Yeah, I think that's that one. I think just everything went wrong. We were poor as a team, but I was really struggling individually, and I couldn't get shut of this injury problem, which I've not really had through my career. So I think that, the whole 2011 season was not a very good memory at all.
I remember it well. It was a right laugh, wasn't it? If you could trade lives with a current cricketer, who would you choose?
I'd probably say Virat Kohli. I mean, I think he's up there with one of the best in the world, but I think it'd be interesting to see, especially with all the hysteria and the media interest he gets out in India. Interesting to trade into his shoes for a day and just see what it's actually like, what the demands are, the expectations, and if it, is actually what it looks from the outside. So I think it'd have to be him.
I'm going to put you in charge of cricket for a day. What would you change?
I would probably The biggest probably bone of contention is the county fixture list and all the travelling from one end of the country from the other. So I think definitely blocks of games, but I would make it where the competitions definitely don't intertwine. So even though there's blocks at the moment where Championship then sometimes overlaps into the 50 overs, and we saw this year Championship went into 2020, I'd have the competitions completely separate. So I'd have to give it a bit more thought, but I'd definitely have Nova Cricket when Championship were on and play the Championship probably in two blocks through the season. So first block maybe 50 overs, then a Championship block, then a 2020, and then finish with Championship.
Best player you've ever played against or with?
Best player played with Darren Lehman.
If you could meet anyone, living or dead, who would you want to meet?
Alex Ferguson.
If you won the lottery, what's the first thing you would do?
Share it with my family.
Who would play you in a movie about your life?
Will Ferrell.
I can see that. What is your first memory of being really excited?
Probably Christmas.
What was the first thing you bought with your own money?
A football, I think.
When was the last time you were nervous?
I would say the game before we won it. I think it was Edgbaston, so the Warwickshire game. I think it was 3 games out this year before Essex played Warwickshire. What's the top item on your bucket list? Probably see Man United winning a European Champions League final live.
Don't want to see that happen. Are you a morning or a night person?
Definitely night.
What celebrity annoys you the most?
Probably anyone from Cheshire Housewives.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how cool are you?
What's 10?
10's being the Fonz, 1's being not cool at all.
5.
If your plane was about to crash, who would you want sitting next to you?
Probably Andrew Flintoff.
Is that because you'd want him to go down with you? Oh.
No, probably. He seems to be able to do anything at the moment, so he'd probably be able to save the plane or something.
If you had access to a time machine, where and when would you go to?
That's a very, very good question. Probably go back to the start of the 1900s, just because I've always wondered what it was like, that time. I don't know a specific time, but I'd say early 1900s, just to see what life would actually be like.
How do you like your steak cooked?
Medium rare.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I'd probably say Spain.
One thing you would change about yourself?
Be more organised.
And finally, what will you be doing in 10 years' time?
Still coaching in cricket.
It's that Badger style.
Thank you very much to Mags for answering the Cricket Badger quick questions this week. Anthony will be back with us next week to talk about Essex's fantastic 2017 season. From everybody's write-offs to Champion County, going to be a really interesting chat that with Anthony McGrath on the Cricket Badger Radio Show next week. Let's get back then to Chatting the Ashes with Ali Martin. So we've got Moeen Ali coming in at 7, and Moeen Ali is, I was actually quite dismissive of Moeen Ali about 2 years ago. I thought that Rashid, maybe it was my Yorkshire bias, but I thought Rashid was the better spinner.
You're definitely a Yorkshire bias, James.
But he's completely proved me wrong over the last 12 months. Hats off to him. He's been absolutely magnificent. The one worry with Moeen going down under is that I don't know about him playing the short ball, and I think he will get quite a few up his nose.
Yeah, he'll get this a bit. Hopefully, I think one of the reasons why he's been so good at number 8 is because he's able to come in against sort of flagging attacks and really take it to them. And you're going to see less, stuff up and around the grill when bowlers are into the sort of 3rd, 4th, 5th spell sort of thing. So moving up one spot potentially slightly might expose him a little bit more. I don't have huge fears on that front, if I'm honest. Partly because of his character. I just think that he's such a level guy. He doesn't get up, he doesn't get down. If he did get pinned, with a short ball, I wouldn't expect it to affect his footwork the next ball. Sort of, you see what I mean? Because he's just so good at resetting and has
absolutely
a clear mind and a clear approach. I think obviously Stokes is a huge loss to England. It's well documented on that front. But this is the one minor crumb of positivity that might come out of it is that I think 7 is Moeen's best spot. Just nudges him up that one position. I think the figures bear it. I haven't got them in front of me, but his average at 7 is way higher than everywhere else, and I can see it being beneficial. I'm not worried about Chris Woakes at number 8 because I think he can equip himself so well, but he's such a good number 9, because if you have Chris Woakes at number 9, the partners, you've got genuine partners for established batsmen up to number 9, which is great. And he's such a great foil for a senior batsman alongside him, Chris Woakes. And I just worry with him at 8 that it just sort of opens up England's tail a touch more. And what we saw 4 years ago was that England's tail just didn't stand up at all, did it? It just got blown away repeatedly by Johnson, which is, Johnson's not playing, of course, but we're expecting a very good Australian attack. So it's a slight worry that has, but we haven't even touched on Chris Woakes really, but you haven't mentioned him, but I think he's a terrific cricketer, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes.
I think it's testament to Chris Woakes that we're both got him inked in. Because you wouldn't have 2 years ago, and he's really added to his game, and he's come in and he's been Mr. Consistent and Mr. Performance. He's been very, very impressive, I think.
Yeah, he had a tough summer, didn't he? He had that side strain, which was a pretty severe injury actually. Side strains are never good for fast bowlers. His was a quite a significant one. It took him a lot longer to come back than expected, and when he did come back, he was just short of a yard. I'd like to think now that having had a decent rest at the end of the summer, he obviously got a few overs under his belt in the one-day series. He's going to come back at optimal pace because he has got the ability to bowl fast and to bowl fast and to get it to move. So I'm encouraged there. I think Paul Collingwood, when he took that 9 for against Durham, Paul Collingwood described them as 90-mile-an-hour leg break. Some more of those, please, Woakes.
Yeah, that's not a bad ball to have in your armoury, is it?
No.
Right, we're down to number 8. That's Chris Woakes. I think there's 2 men in the last 3 that we can both agree on. Stuart Broad has had previous success against Australia, both in England and Australia. Jimmy Anderson, the all-time Test wicket taker. I don't think too many people are going to argue about their inclusion in the side. So I think we can ink those in, Ali. It leaves us one more bowler to have here. We've had Stephen Finn obviously added to the squad to replace Ben Stokes. You've got Mason Crane in there as a potential dual spin attack. Craig Overton, the Somerset seamer, is in there as well. Which way would you go there? And Jake Ball obviously as well, the Notts bowler. Which way would you go with that final spot?
At the moment, I think if I was looking at the first test, I'd potentially go with Jake Ball first. I like Jake Ball a lot. I think he's got a lovely, smooth, fluid action. I think he'll enjoy the bounce of also the Australian pitches. But then it would be open to review, rotation, etc. Because there is a case for Overton, albeit uncapped and slightly unknown quantity, is that he does have a strong record with the bat, and I don't like necessarily picking bowlers as to what they can do with the bat, but we are talking about an England team that is going to have to rejiggle a bit and move everyone up one, and so having a strong number 9, just helps them a bit. So Overton's definitely in with a shout. I find the Finn selection interesting because he's so mercurial. I mean,
yes.
When the best Stephen Finn is as good as anything out there, I think. I mean, absolutely, when he's on top of his game, he's up there. He's right up there. But when he's not, things can fall apart quite quickly, as we've seen. It's well documented. There is a test performance of Steve Finn's that I think is one of the most underrated performances I've seen, which was in Johannesburg. It was the Wanderers and the last tour of South Africa when England won, and they won the series in Johannesburg. It's the first innings. England's bowlers were falling apart on the first day, partly because of illness. Some of them didn't get the lines and lengths right either. Steve Finn held the whole attack together. Second innings, side strain, and we've not seen him in Test cricket since. There was that encouraging performance against Lancashire at the back end of the summer. If he gets it right, he could be a real wild card. But at the moment, I think Jake Ball for me. I just think he brings consistency. I think he'll enjoy the Australian wickets as well. There is, it does make it a sort of 9, 10, 11 that's not particularly strong with the bat, but, we do have to look at people's strengths first and foremost, and I would say just Ball at the moment shades it for me, but and then potentially, if the Lions, and it goes well in the Lions for Mark Wood, that he may join the tour, perhaps for the third test in Perth.
I think we differ on this one because I actually fancy Overton for that spot.
Okay.
I like him. I think he's a really good. I mean, he's very consistent for Somerset. How many times you look at the scorecard after about half an hour of the first day's play, and he's already picked up 3 wickets. He's got He's a little bit quicker than people think as well, and he's got this knack of taking wickets in little clusters. And I think as a third prong of the attack, he could be quite useful. And I think he would find the Australian pitches quite decent too. In his favour, so I'd be tempted to go with him. I like Jake Ball. I think Jake Ball is the long-term replacement for Anderson in the Test team. I think he's more that kind of ilk. But I think Overton for me. But I think pretty much, Ali, we've agreed on the rest of it. If we go down the 11, we've got Cook and Stoneman opening the batting. We both agreed that Balance rather than Vince at number 3. Root, the captain, at 4. David Milan comes in at 5. Bairstow, Moeen and Chris Wokes go up 1 to 6, 7 and 8. Ball stroke Overton in there at 9. And Stuart Broad and Anderson bringing up the rear. So, that if we found it that easy, I think it's, maybe they're not too far away.
Well, no, the England management have got the benefit of warm-up games as well. We're picking it with 3 warm-up games to go, and I'm definitely open to a bit of flexibility, especially in that the sort of final seamer spot, especially. See how people go, see how they thrive out there, see who enjoys it the best. Maybe we come back and do a review in a couple of weeks and we have a rethink, and that might just be an entire podcast on one place in the England team. That
you can certainly see those warm-up games being very important, can't you? Because if James Vince scores a double century and Balance doesn't get any runs, excuse me, if Overton takes 7 for 24 and Ball doesn't take any wickets at all, that does change the emphasis of what we've just talked about, doesn't it, completely?
Yeah. And it'll be an interesting time, I think, for Broad and Anderson. We sort of brushed past them almost because, that they are just going to be picked. There is no question about both their records, but it'll be interesting tours for both of them. Stuart Broad did stand up in the last Ashes series. He took wickets, and I think, he's got a bit of a point to prove because he missed that 10-11 tour. He was injured in Adelaide and then missed the rest of the history that England made that time. So he's going to be dead keen for it, and had a particularly unlucky summer. I don't think he bowled as badly as his numbers suggested. It was a reasonably lean patch. I think he took his wickets at 32, and yet I seem to remember jotting down that he'd had 11 drop catches off his bowling over the course of the summer. And actually, if we're talking about issues that England have got to get right ASAP, it is their catching, because
Absolutely.
It was woeful during the summer. And, and even, someone like Ben Stokes, who is kind of England's best fielder, even he was putting them down. So they've got to address that pretty quickly, and Stokes, normally so brilliant, again, his loss will be felt in that third way, which is in the field.
As you say, catching is so important. You can't afford to drop David Warner on 5 or Stephen Smith on 5 because they will make you pay out there.
Yeah, definitely. And you're not going to. England they're probably not have an attack, especially with a Kookaburra ball, that's going to create 13, 14, 15 chances in an innings. They're going to have to hold everything that comes their way. It'd be interesting to see how Anderson goes. He's coming off the back of an incredible summer. I mean, he was so consistent over the summer with, he just had it on a string, didn't he? I know he's sort of big records like the 500 can bring his sort of career into sharp focus, and then we start looking over a sort of wider sort of career and trends, etc. But when you just look at his summer that he's just had, he is at the top of his game at the moment. And another guy with a point to prove, because he did get hit out the attack a little bit last time around, but I think what people forget is 2010-11, he was a leading wicket taker on either side. So he can do it with a Kookaburra ball in Australia. We've got established proof of that already, and he's at the top of his game. So I'm hopeful, I think, of Anderson going well.
Well, what Broad and Anderson both give you is massive experience in Australia, isn't it? So you can throw the ball at them if you Joe Root and know that they know exactly what's expected of them and what they need to do. And with Anderson as well, I mean, he's often been criticised of struggling with the Kookaburra ball, but there is that day-night test, isn't there, where, potentially under the lights, he might get a little bit more swing out there and cause a few problems.
Yeah. The day-night test is interesting, actually, isn't it? Because, I mean, we started at Gabba. 30 years unbeaten there in Australia, the Gabatoir, they just rolled teams over, and the foundation of England's victory in 10-11 was just getting out of the Gabba with a draw.
Yeah.
And if they can do that this time around, then the Adelaide Test feels a bit more of a game of roulette, because, because conditions will swing wildly throughout the day. We even saw Faf du Plessis, the South African captain, a sort of funky declaration in the day-night test last year. And actually, that reminds me, South Africa, they went well out there, didn't they? They won in Australia. They exposed the fact that Australia aren't as good as a lot of people say. They caused a massive period of introspection in Australian cricket, forced wholesale changes, players being dropped left, right and centre. And South Africa, I mean, they won in Perth with Dale staying injured, so they won it with 3 bowlers in Perth. So they've proven, and England have just obviously enjoyed it against them this summer, is that South Africa have proven that it can be done out there. We shouldn't be building up Australia too much, albeit, I don't know, are we going to have a chat about Australia? I'm kind of...
Yeah.
Well, I'm intrigued by Australia because on paper, the pace attack that they could put out is quite jaw-dropping in some ways because of the speed some of the guys can hit. Clark and Cummins and Hazelwood is a very, very, very good bowler, very consistent with his lines. Could play a sort of similar role to Ryan Harris 4 years ago. But what happened 4 years ago was that Australia got the same team on the park 5 tests in a row. If they can get this attack on the park 5 tests in a row, then they're very strong favourites. But it's a big ask. Pat Cummins has never played a test at home in Australia, and
that's bizarre, isn't it?
I know, which is a bizarre stat, and he's such an incredible talent. I mean, we saw him in the one-day series here in 2015. Is that he is quick. He's properly quick, but to hold it together and what it does to his body over 5 tests, I'll be intrigued to see how it goes. And then we start looking at reserves, who comes in. We've seen Behrendorff, the left armour. We've seen Peter Siddle, who could come back into it as well. But England will be hoping to get into that sort of second string. And try and turn over get a bit of turnover in the Australia team as well.
That South African series that you mentioned can be used as a bit of a blueprint for England, can't it? Because you mentioned Dale Steyn was out. South Africa didn't have anybody of express pace. They used discipline. They bowled lines. They all understood their roles. Rabada bowled probably the fastest, but he's not going to really frighten anybody with his pace. And they did their jobs, didn't they? If England can go out there and do the same, then they can cause problems, I think, for this Australian side. I mean, ICC Test rankings, you can take with them with a pinch of salt, but England are higher at the moment, 3rd against 5th.
Yeah, a lot of that owes to Australia's sort of struggles in Asia, although albeit England haven't played that well in Asia recently in the last sort of 18 months. One idea to if the Test series is drawn at the end, maybe the way to settle it is a one-off test in Chittagong or something.
It wouldn't last very long, would it?
No. But no, I mean, and there are vulnerabilities in that Australia team. Sort of people like Warner and Smith need no introduction, but then they're struggling with a number 6 position. Glenn Maxwell is the sort of wild card that they'd like to pick. I think they want to get him in the team because of his talent, but he is very inconsistent in Test cricket. And Matthew Wade, Peter Neville is the sort of debate behind the stumps. I mentioned earlier that England really do have an advantage there with Johnny Bairstow so consistent and with both the gloves and as a batsman. Matt Wade hasn't really sort of set the world alight since he's come back into the side, and they're in that sort of, they're in the kind of batsman-keeper, keeper-batsman debate at the moment, aren't they? Because Neville is considered the better glove man. So that is another area that England can try and exploit, because Brad had him 4 years ago. He was an absolute game changer there, wasn't he? Every time England thought they had Australia down in a Test match, Hadding came out and he turned it around. Yeah,
he did the Gilchrist thing, didn't he? I mean, how many times in the past have England had Australia at like 123 for 4, and then all of a sudden you look at the scoreboard 2 hours later and it's 380 for 4, and Gilchrist is on 100. Yeah, Gilchrist has almost saddled future generations of Australian wicketkeepers with well, it's just a thankless task, isn't it? Nobody can beat that man.
Yeah, no, certainly, and yeah, whichever way they go, England have got the advantage. So that's definitely one plus point for England there. Finn will be interesting because Nathan Lyon is an extremely experienced operator in Australia. I remember last series he got a lot of joy going around the wicket, didn't he? Bowling wicket to wicket, getting it, enjoying the bounce that the pitches had to offer, and just providing a bit of relief for the guys like Harris, who we know is held together with sticky tape, and Mitchell Johnson, who has only bowled in short spells, and Siddle was a bit more of the workhorse. But Lyon held the whole thing together. Now, I would like to see England being proactive and attacking and aggressive against Nathan Lyon. Don't let him settle and increase the burden on the rest of their bowlers, because they don't have an all-rounder. Australia, they haven't had an all-rounder since... well, we're going back a few decades, aren't we? A genuine all-rounder. So,
Richie Benno.
Yes. Keith Miller, I think.
Yeah. If you look at Johnny Bairstow, we both agree that he's better than the Australian counterpart, whoever that might be. Moeen Ali against Nathan Lyon is an interesting one, because Moeen Ali's obviously stood up with the ball. I think he's going to score more runs than Nathan Lyon. So in a way, that's potentially advantage England as well. in that department. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because Moeen is an all-rounder, and I think probably his overall sort of net returns you'd hope would be greater than Nathan Lyon's, but Nathan Lyon is the slightly better bowler, more experienced, and what do they call him, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, as an Australian finger spinner. So just with the ball, if we're talking just with the ball, they've got the edge there, but there's no reason why England should let Lyon settle and try and dominate him if I were them.
Just overall, comparing the two sides, it is almost as simple as Cook, Root against Smith and Warner, and Hazelwood and Stark against Broad and Anderson, and then what else can the two teams cobble together from the rest of them, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. It's going to be. I mean, it's going to be a fascinating series. Blimey, people talk about sort of, whitewashers 5-0. It's kind of that we've seen two in our lifetime is quite phenomenal. To see a third, I just cannot I cannot picture it at all, especially with the luxury of an Adelaide Test, and especially with Australian a little bit sort of more brittle than we've seen before. I always try and sort of judge series ahead of a series. I try and judge it on which team I think is more collapsible, if that makes sense. And I see collapses in both sides. So I'm if I was going to be actually, you're not pressing me for a prediction.
It was going to be my final question, Ali. So,
okay. Well, should I keep my powder dry? How long have we got?
Well, I look back at the last 5 series in Australia, and there's just been 2 drawn Test matches in that time. The positive results at the various venues that are going to be used there are more than likely. So, in terms of kind of big numbers for a series prediction, 5-0, 3-2, whatever is probably more likely than having a 1-0 series win for one side. But yeah, you look at England, I think they're more than capable of winning a couple of Test matches, and that's potentially all they have to do, isn't it? To retain the Ashes, they need to come away by not losing this series because they have the urn in their back pocket.
Yeah, you won't get them saying it because they're going there to win the series, of course. But it is a nice slight fallback, and I think it's perfectly within their capabilities to come back with the Ashes retained. A series win would be out of this world, I think.
Yeah, I'm predicting a 2-2. I can see it being 2-2 going into the final Test match. England winning the toss, putting up a big score, shoring up. I know exactly what you just said. Yeah, they'll never say they're not going to play for a win, but you're not telling me that if Root's 450 for 5 at lunch on day 2, he's going to declare. With 2-2 in his back pocket in the series, he's going to basically be very, very happy with the draw and come back with the urn, isn't he? So I can see a 2-2 result in this one. I think Australia will have their moments, England will have their moments, but basically everything that we've said during this podcast, it's built up to be an absolutely fascinating series. There's so many imponderables, so many things that we're not quite sure of, so many little battles within this series, batsman against bowler, except vice versa. It really is exciting, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. No, it is, and I love the Australian tour, partly in its predictability in terms of the fixtures. We know the grounds and the itinerary so well because it's been this way for a while now. But I love that there is that slight element of sort of jeopardy thrown in by the day-night tests, and I could easily see England being either 1-0 down, which I think they take after 2 tests, or 1-1 after 2 tests. And if that either of those situations, I think they're still well in the series there. To go 2-0 down would be very hard to come back from. But I just think that it's just so fascinating how it's going to, as we mentioned right at the top, 2 imperfect sides sprinkled with stardust, with big question marks over certain areas of their team as well. Which one's going to stand up? If you're going to press me for a prediction, and having said all that and slightly talked up England, I just fear that Australia's second string, the home comforts that they'll enjoy, I think they'll just have a bit more. The second string will have a little bit more, and I'm talking batting mainly.
Yeah.
And I just suspect that we're going to see potentially 3-1 Australia.
Oh, Ali, it was going so well. It was going so well.
Having said that, James, you've stolen my 2-2 prediction, so I just for the sake of can't just agree the whole time. So if I can't have 2-2, and I'm ruling it out myself because you've said it, I'm just going to nudge towards Australia and home conditions. But would be delighted to be proved wrong.
It's one of those series, isn't it? Just to finish off here, where England get on that plane, they go down there, knowing the pressure that's on them, knowing the the significance of this series. The Ashes series is as big as it gets in cricket. One of those guys wearing an England blazer could come back an absolute hero with their stock in cricket just risen beyond belief, couldn't they?
Yeah, well, definitely, but we saw that in 02-03, and that man was Michael Vaughan, and England went down 4-1. So we need more than just one person doing it. I don't know. There's reason to be optimistic. There's reason to be cheerful, and despite my prediction, and that's a probably conservative sort of arse-covering prediction that I've given you there, I think there are reasons to be optimistic. My God, what a difference Ben Stokes would make. And his name is not going to go away throughout the series, whether he's there or not, and I suspect it's going to be not. It's such a massive blow, and again, that probably leans me more slightly towards that Australian prediction as well. But
give me a prediction then if Ben Stokes was there. What do you think that would change things significantly?
I think it would, yeah. I think the balance that he brings to the side, I think in all three facets of the game, in the field as well, I genuinely think England could target a series win, if not a nice 2-2, and we'll take the earn home. Thanks very much. He really came of age in the last sort of 18 months as a batsman. Bowling's a little bit more fleeting, but then we see when things are in his favour, he can be superb, especially when the ball's swinging, and he's another one I'd like to have seen, hopefully swinging out under the lights in Adelaide. It all feels a bit too soon, though. Even a best-case scenario, you don't see him arriving till later in the tour. But that'll all come out in the wash hopefully soon. It's rumbled on, hasn't it? It's been a month now since that happened.
You've got two elements to that, haven't you? The police will take as much time as they want. They haven't got the deadlines of an Ashes series. The police, do they?
No. For them, it's just another scuffle in Bristol city centre. So there's no reason why they should be sort of accelerating anything to help England out. But at the same time, it's just kind of left everything a bit hanging at the moment. We're all still waiting.
It's annoying as well, isn't it? It basically gives the Australians a chance to crow, doesn't it, before a series starts?
It does, and yeah, they have been. It's funny because at first they were reasonably tentative around the subject. Now they've all started unloading their own thoughts on it. I saw Glenn Maxwell piping up today. I thought, crikey, mate, just get in your own team first. But yeah, my one concern about the Stokes effect is I hope they don't become insular. I hope they don't adopt a siege mentality. I hope they venture out of their hotel rooms. I hope they enjoy everything that Australia has to offer away from the cricket, because we've seen, what a devastating effect it can have on a team if they do put the barricades up, as we saw 4 years ago, go within themselves, get too sort of tetchy and paranoid and think everyone's out to get them. They've got to really enjoy this tour. It's one of the, it's the absolute crown jewels in in England, in a test career, is to play an Ashes series in Australia. Go out there and enjoy it. Show what you can do.
Well, I know there's one man that won't be in a bar at 2:30 in the morning, and that's Ali Martin of The Guardian. Ali, I hope you have a great trip out there, mate. I hope you really enjoy Australia, and, let's hope we have some great cricket as well.
Yeah, and fingers crossed my prediction is utterly wrong.
Yeah, hopefully. 2 more or better. Come on, Joe Root, bring that urn back.
Cracking. Cheers, James.
It's that Badger style.
Thank you very much for joining us this week on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. Always good to have you with us. We'll be back again next week to talk about all things cricket, including that chat with former Yorkshire and England all-rounder Anthony McGrath about Essex's fantastic 2017 season. And you can join us there. Get your questions in, james@cricketbadger.com. Follow us on Twitter @cricket_badger. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, click on subscribe and you'll be informed of our future episodes as they come out. I will see you next week, Badgers.
It's that Badger style.